So to begin with, welcome to YLF and thank you for joining us. I want to begin with a very personal anecdote, like very personal experience that I want to share. The first time I spoke to Dr. Sainath was in 2008. In 2008, it was the time when I left television journalism and I took a break and I was thinking that I'm not going to come back to journalism. And I was working with the NGO. And as part of that NGO, I invited Dr. Sainath for a program to speak in a program organized by that NGO. And in that, when I contacted, you were somewhere in USA or UK. I don't recall, but you were not in India. So I think you had time to readily respond to mails. And I got his response. And when we were talking, I asked him, what's your designation? Like, because I was not very sure whether he was still with the Hindu as rural affairs editor or not. So I just wanted to ensure that when I put his name, I wanted to make it very proper. So I asked what your designation is. Then the reply that you gave me actually changed my life as a journalist. Dr. Sainath, half jokingly, told me that whatever the fancy title is, I am a field reporter. This is something, it was a watershed moment in my life as a journalist. And from that moment onwards, I started unlearning all this, aura and paraphernalia around designations in journalism, like whether you are a senior editor or whether you are this thing and that thing. Basically, a journalist is a field reporter. So let's begin from that point.
Can I? I'm going to make a request of the audience, which I have been doing wherever I have been in the last 2 weeks, to stand and observe a moment's silence in memory of the murdered journalist, Mukesh Chandrakar of Bastar. Thank you. Mukesh was a 32-year-old young fellow who was murdered. I knew him personally. Last year, when I was going around with my new book, he interviewed me for YouTube, met him in Bastar, and other times also I met him in Bastar. And his murder is very relevant to the questions you have in mind.
Yeah, of course. I was about to ask Dr. Sainath about the situation of journalism in India now, and I will come to that point later. To begin with, as I said in the beginning, what is the state of affairs on rural reporting in India, both regarding the legacy media and the digital media? Especially when we go through your platform like Pari or your recent book on this freedom fighters, the last heroes, the kind of people, the rural Indians that journalists like P. Sainath bringing in, where are they in the legacy media? Why they are absent from the legacy media?
Actually, I don't believe they are absent from the legacy media. I believe there are hundreds of fantastic journalists working in the worst newspapers and channels. Okay? There are hundreds, if not thousands, of fine journalists working in the worst media institutions. However, they do not have the access of freedom to publish. They don't. Three fundamental things that I want to tell you about to locate anything else you want to do about media. One, after 1,000 seminars on freedom of the press, where I keep arguing, it's not freedom of the press, it's freedom of the purse. It's the money that matters. Don't look at journalism and media don't look at one of the most fundamental differences that happened from the 80s. Journalism and media became two different entities. Media is institutional. The channels, the portals, the newspapers, the radio stations, the FM stations, these are media. They are based on profit. They are profit seeking. Journalism is what guys like you and I do for a living. Yeah? And the struggle of the journalist in the legacy media is, how do I sell my labor without selling my soul? That is the struggle of every journalist in the world today. How do we sell our labor without selling our soul? Second, it's absolutely wrong to understand and locate the media of today, the so-called mainstream media, more correctly described as corporate media rather than legacy or mainstream. Look, the average national daily, even the definition of what is a national daily. A national daily is any daily that has one edition coming out of New Delhi. The rest of us are anti-national. So you can have a newspaper that publishes only from Delhi, print order of 5,000, it's a national daily. Anyway, across India, all the big dailies, the percentage of rural news of rural origin on the front pages of dailies across this country, 0.67% of front page news is of rural origin. For 69% of the population of the country, you allocate 0.67% of the front page. Inside pages, all the beats, all the social sector beats, education, development, housing, whatever all those beats together get less space than the two portfolios, crime and entertainment. And as you know, in India, crime and entertainment have a very heavy overlap. I mean, why do we cover Salman Khan's Black Buck case? Because we love the Black Buck. Why are there 200 reporters in the court when it is a Salman Khan case? Because of that, there is a huge overlap even to make entertainment of crime. Right? So that's the second thing. Third is, has anyone here got an idea of what is the financial value of Indian media? What is the financial value in rupees and dollars or rupees and paisa of Indian media? It changed dramatically. It was always very large in the last 20 years. It changed dramatically in April last year. In on March 31st, 2023, Ernst & Young, that company, like Deloitte or Standard & Poor, Ernst & Young, which tracks it every year, declared that the Indian media, by which I believe they mean all the media that are listed, the listed media were worth 2.32 trillion rupees. 2.32 trillion has 12 zeros. 2.32 trillion rupees was the value of the Indian media. On April 1st week, the biggest owner of that value, whose name is, as you know, Mukesh Ambani, in April 1st week, Reliance Jio entered into an agreement with Disney Hotstar. An agreement which gave Mr. Ambani control of 60% of all streaming in India. All streaming in India, 60% is in the hands of one individual, and the deal with Disney Hotstar was worth $8.5 billion. On March 31st, the value was $28 billion. April 7th, the Indian media's value, listed value, went to $36 billion, of which 40% of the value is controlled by one man. You know, all you people here in Kerala, when you watch ETV Malayalam, you're not watching Enadu TV Malayalam channel. You are watching Mukesh Ambani's ETV channel. Except the 5 Telugu channels, all the other 19 ETV channels have been owned by Ambani for 20 years now. And in those, by the way, Mr. Ambani doesn't know how many television channels he owns. I could tell him, but I don't think he's interested in having a conversation with me. But imagine that the value of, somewhere are closing in on 50% of the value of your entire media is in the hands of one man. The other man has taken over NDTV, taken over, what part of Quint is that, I don't remember. But you are seeing the greatest concentration of ownership of Indian media in history. Now you get to, what about social media? Doesn't it give us freedom? Guys, sorry to tell you, digital monopolies are the nastiest monopolies in human history. They are far more deadly than your legacy media or they are also corporate media. Now, I'll give you an example, two examples. One is, what makes digital media deadlier as monopolies than any monopoly in human history? No monopoly in history, not Rupert Murdoch's monopoly, no monopoly in history, not in banking, railways, shipping. No monopoly in history has the unique feature of digital media. These guys own your personal data. I call them human data traffickers. They are data traffickers. They sell and purchase and own your data. They traffic in your data. Every time you go on Amazon, if say if my friend Professor Chaman Lal sends a message, email, that he is planning to have a holiday in Brazil, how many advertisements do you get for resorts in Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro in your email? They have algorithmed us out of our intellect. We are algorithmed out of our intellect. This is the power of that. Oh, in the last 3 days, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, Instagram, Meta, publicly surrendered to Donald Trump. What I'm saying is that the financial interests of corporate media will determine what it covers. Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, who used to be anti-Trump, owns Amazon, owns Washington Post, surrendered to Donald Trump. All this, not because they like Donald Trump, but because they need him for the money they make. And they need him not to disturb the money they make. Please don't look at your media as when you analyze them, don't analyze them in the old doctrines of freedom of expression, fourth pillar of democracy, media as fourth estate. The media are closer to real estate than to fourth estate. Okay? So understand that you need to analyze media as corporations. When you analyze them as corporations, you will get a far greater idea of where to locate our struggles.
Yeah, and most of these media corporates own industries like mining, like then how they are going to, this is such a, such a complex thing, how they are going to report on something. And this brutal murder of the journalist in Chhattisgarh is very relevant in this context. So coming to that point, I wanted to hear from you on journalism has become a very dangerous profession in India nowadays. Journalists are being booked, framed up, beaten up, and even killed, as we saw last week, that's unfortunate incident. And journalists are being booked under draconian laws like that of UAPA and all. And there are around 16 to 17 journalists in India booked under UAPA, and I am one among them, as you know. So this is the situation in India now. So how do you analyze the situation? Is it something new, or was it there from the right beginning?
The danger and risk to journalists in rural India particularly is a very old problem. It is not starting with Modi in 2014, but it takes a flying leap forward in terms of scale. First thing you understand, that if you're a small rural journalist, you do not have the insurance of caste and class that Shahina and I do. Okay? There is some insurance in that, in our social backgrounds, in our class backgrounds, there is some insurance. Mr. Modi's singular achievement has been to tear that insurance and put it in the dustbin. Therefore, now we are looking at what happens to journalists. Okay. Long before 2014, I had already written an introduction for the CPJ, Center for Protection of Journalists, for their report on journalist killings in India from 1991 onwards. Now, as young journalists go and the kind of problems you face, there's a difference between rural India and urban India. If you're in urban India, in rural India, you can very easily meet the fate of Mukesh Chandrakar. It depends on what journalism you are doing. What is the kind of journalism? I tell my students, I've been teaching journalism 38 years. I always tell my students, if you do challenging journalism, you will be challenged. If you don't do challenging journalism, you can go through 50 years warming your stool and nothing will happen to you. It depends on what kind of journalism you do. Mukesh Chandrakar did the journalism of people, not the journalism of power. He did the journalism of protest, not the journalism of appeasement, not the journalism of kowtowing to corporate power or to political power. So what journalism you do, remember this. If you are doing challenging journalism in urban areas, you are also not safe. Please remember that the 5 major political deaths, assassinations in this country, all those 5 people were journalists. Narendra Dabolkar, the intellectual, anti-superstition movement leader, he was a journalist. He ran a magazine. I presided over the 25th year of that magazine. Antashraddha Nirmulan, Andolan. He was a passionate journalist. He was murdered. Then Govind Pansare, CPI leader, trade union leader, wrote the finest book on Shivaji, showing Shivaji as a secular peasant king who was pro-farmer and gave instructions not to loot farmers and not to trouble them too much, things like that. Govind Pansare was a regular commentator on TV and a regular columnist, murdered. Then Professor M.M. Kalburgi, academic, former vice chancellor, a prolific columnist, murdered. Gauri Lankesh, bilingual journalist, but paid the price for her writings in Kannada. Gauri Lankesh, journalist. And then Bukhari in Kashmir. What did these journalists have in common? Especially the first 4 famous public intellectuals. They had 2 things in common. They all wrote in their mother tongue. They wrote in Indian languages, which threatens fundamentalists far more than we do in English. That's why, by the way, in People's Archive of Rural India, we publish every day in 15 languages. We publish in 15 languages, including Malayalam. All these intellectuals, Pansare, Kalburgi, Dabolkar, Gauri, the second thing second issue, they were all rationalists. I beg you to understand this. The fundamentalists are not so afraid of secularists. Secularism doesn't cost them much. They are terrified of rationalists. Rationalists give the game away. They come and show you how your miracle was done. They come onto the stage and show you where that vibhuti is coming from. All the 4 were rationalists. They were staunch rationalists.
Besides, except Gauri Lankesh, all others were aged too. We haven't even seen in cinema violence on very old people. but we have witnessed in our real life. Most of them were 80, 81, 82, except Gauri Lankesh.
Yeah, that's right. But Mukesh Chandrakar is much younger than Gauri Lankesh. I'm saying that the kind of journalism you do will determine whether you are attacked or not. Now there is a new tactic for the last 3 years since the attack on NewsClick. The new tactic is don't get famous, well-entrenched journalists. Don't bring them sympathy by shooting them or beating them. Attack them with economic offences cases, like they did with NewsClick. In the history of India, not even under British rule, was an attack happen where 46 journalists were raided at dawn in an operation involving nearly 500 police officers. Nearly 500 police officers or police personnel were involved in the raids on NewsClick. 46 journalists were taken in, their devices confiscated. Most of them have to this day not returned those devices. They have not got back their hard disks, their phones, whatever. They had to create new ones. So there is this second route of attack on established urban journalists. The attack on NewsClick was not an attack on NewsClick. It was a warning to every one of us here. It was a warning to you, Shahina, to me, to every journalist sitting here. This is what will be your fate. I never thought in my lifetime that a minister would hold up my photograph on the floor of Parliament, as Smriti Irani did, and declaimed that this is the man behind the farmer unrest, the brain behind the farmer unrest in the country. I was very proud of it, okay? But she also said a number of other things that are absolutely nonsense. But then so much of what Smriti Irani says is always nonsense. So you don't take that too personally, right?
This is not nonsense. This is correct. You are the person behind.
So I think that the person behind the farmer agitation is the farmer. Nothing will happen without the farmer. And I think how legacy media or any other media covers the farm agitation is a wonderful example of where the media are. Did your media tell you that the struggle of the farmers at the gates of Delhi was the greatest constitutional, democratic, peaceful protest for justice in the world in the last 30 years? In the last 30 years, and organized at the height of COVID-19. Did they tell you that 720 farmers died in the protest camps of COVID, of hypothermia, excessive cold, of pneumonia? This was what happened, but they kept fighting. So I won't take their credit away from them, Shahina. I support them unreservedly. That's another matter. But let me give you one more comparison. Which is the famous struggle for justice that all of you are familiar with, which your newspapers used to front page? Occupy Wall Street, 2011, America. Thousands, a few, 7,000, 8,000, very idealistic young Americans, very idealistic, mainly techies, occupied Zuccotti Park on Wall Street. Zuccotti Park is a privately owned park. And the owner of Zuccotti Park was sympathetic to the kids. He never asked them to get out. He never asked them to be cleared or evicted. But at the end of 9 weeks, the mayor of New York ordered the NYPD, throw them out. In 8 hours, Zuccotti Park was clean. 9 weeks they lasted, 8 hours they were thrown out. The Kissan Andolan of the Indian farmer lasted 54 weeks at the gate of Delhi. Nobody could break their spirit. Nobody could break their will. But what did the media have to say? It didn't even mention that this was the greatest struggle in history. Nor did they tell you this is the first time that the Indian farmer has confronted corporate power directly since the East India Company. Since the time of the East India Company, this is the first time the Indian farmer is up against the corporate world, and they did not flinch. They did not flinch. Why is that it was so poorly reported? Who owns the media? Who was going to benefit from the farm laws? Ambani, Adani. Who owned the media? Ambani, Adani. So why are they going to tell you that every second slogan in the Singhu, Tikri, Ghaziabad, Shahjahanpur, every second slogan named Ambani, Adani. Did the media ever tell you that Mr. Ambani's personal wealth is greater than the GDP of Punjab? That Mr. Adani's personal wealth is greater than that of Haryana? I should say GSDP, but GDP you'll understand easier. Okay? The two of them together, their personal wealth is far greater than the combined GDP of Punjab and Haryana. Did you ever read this in your mail? Did you read one editorial saying the farmers are right? Oh, the great journalism of courage. Their editorial would say the government is to blame for not talking sweetly to the farmer. These are all rural idiots. You talk to them sweetly, you can get them to do. The last paragraph would say, but the laws are good, they should be there. Okay? The farmers fought and destroyed it. They defeated the media. That's a very important thing in that struggle.
Yeah, I think it is very important to mention one thing, like journalists are said to be contemporary historians, like journalists write the history of the time that we live in. In that sense, I mean, for me personally, the biggest contribution from Dr. Sainath is that the Indians started listening to the farmers in India after he started writing continuously about farmers. And also like this very idea, this very term, farmer suicide, which is coined by Sainath's School of Journalism. That was the first time that we started thinking about why farmers are committing suicide, and there is a connection between the occupation that they do and their life and death. So I think it is very important still, I believe, yeah, of course, the entire struggle, that entire movement belonged to the farmers of India, but people like Dr. Sainath, journalists like Dr. Sainath had a stake in it, in this sense, because he made us think about farmers, their life, their death. So indeed, I would say that he has a role in it. And then when we talk about such silence from the side of the media, who have never reported that in every second slogan there were the names of Adani and Ambani, and this farmer struggle was reported very poorly. My question is, what is the way forward for journalists like me or several others who want to do real journalism? What is the revenue model before us? Because as you said, there is everyday raid by all this, enforcement directorate. And when you start an establishment very humbly, you have to expect that somebody would knock at your door anytime. So what is the way forward?
Well, firstly, Shahina, I will thank you for being so generous to me and attributing so much credit to my work. I should tell you that in the first 10 years of covering farm suicides, how your media used to mock it. They used to mock it. At a meeting of the Nagpur Union of Journalists, in 2007, held at that time to felicitate me for the Magsaysay Award. A senior journalist, 25 years experience covering Vidarbha, stands up from a great newspaper full of courage, stands up and tells me, is it not a fact that farmers are committing suicide because all these fellows are alcoholics and drunkards? I said, it's a fact that alcohol is a problem in the farming community, as it is with every other community. But if alcoholism was the driving factor behind suicide, damn it, there would be no journalists left in the world. And very few academics, and no human rights activists at all. Okay? So this kind of nonsense of trivializing, mocking the farmers' suicide, what is the way forward? I think there are two things, minimal. There are maybe 20 things to do, but there are two things which are minimal. The first is to facilitate, maybe even felicitate, but facilitate and support the many independent media. I don't like this word alternate media or non-mainstream. I do not concede the word mainstream media to corporate media. How do you call someone mainstream which excludes 85% of your population? Yeah, they are not mainstream. They are extremely elitist and narrow. The first thing is to support and facilitate independent media, the Wire, Pari, Scroll, whoever, independent media that is not willing to take dictation from the state. That is one. How many of us subscribe to or support EPW, Economic and Political Weekly? It is also losing its sting now. Financial survival. You know, Shahina, to take this question of revenue model, I'm very happy to take this issue. Every time I meet people and I'm, talking about how we need to build this independent media, they say, but what is your revenue model? I never had one. No great creative work in history was done by someone who had a revenue model and got it cleared with the chartered accountant of the venture capitalist. If Shakespeare was required to have a revenue model, would Romeo and Juliet have an unhappy ending? Never. Would Disney ever agree to have a tragic ending? No chance. The Disney films made a comedy and a happy ending out of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Quasimodo lives, everybody lives happily. And it's all fun. Because tragedies don't make money. Tragedies don't make revenue. So everything has to be converted to fun and entertainment. Right? So when nowadays, finally I got tired. When everybody asks me what is your revenue model, I tell them I have two revenue models. See, we don't take advertising. We think there is enough rubbish being sold to enough youngsters through advertising that converts their dreams and wants into essential needs, which they are not. So we don't take advertising, and therefore we have no advertising revenue. We don't accept government funds, not that the government will ever give me a paisa. We don't have direct corporate funds either. We get our money from individual random donations from the trustees of Pari, which includes myself. We do other jobs, we put our money. And donations, people like you account for 31% of our revenue. Anyway, and foundations. Nowadays, when anyone asks me, what is your revenue model? I say, well, we follow the, models that are, they use other terminology in the business schools. We follow the BB revenue model and the BBS revenue model. BB revenue model is begging bowl. BBS is beg, borrow and steal. That is the revenue model we follow. Any friend of mine from JNU days who runs into me is at danger of facing extortion demands within the first 10 minutes. Because many of them have become vice chancellors of universities and ministers also. Okay, so this is my revenue model. Yeah, that's what we do. What is the way forward for us? Within the legacy media, an intellectual resistance. Pushing the envelope, that is what I did for 35 years inside that corporate media.
So do you
Push
see
the boundaries.
Do you see a difference, in the kind of resistance that had or it still has? I'm asking, whether it is coming down from the youngsters, how much is there?
It's come down very dramatically for one single reason. The demolition of unions. the destruction of journalist unions, as Madhvan Kutty sir knows very well, from 1985, we turned journalists from tenured job into contract journalism. Contract journalist is like, contract hitman, supari killer, whatever. When you have got 11 months, the entire origin of the paid news scandal, which you'll remember I broke that scandal in the Hindu. The paid news scandal comes from forcing journalists to do things they don't want to do. Journalists used to ring me up and tell me, they're asking me to cover so-and-so very favorably, and Sainath, I am 2 months away from renewal of my 11-month contract. I have 3 EMIs, housing EMI, vehicle EMI, and EMI on the education loan I've taken for my daughter to go to Columbia University. Sainath, do you want me to be a hero? Yeah? So all this happened, the independence of the journalist happened with the contract system destroying the journalist unions. Journalists could no longer, Kerala still has some semblance of a journalist union. Delhi Union of Journalists has a strong union. Nowhere else in the country are the unions capable of even challenging the management because the contract system killed us. That's one huge difference. Second is, I came into journalism in 1980. You look how the commercialization takes place. When I joined United News of India, New Delhi, September 1980, I remember the day because it was the day the Iran-Iraq war broke and I was alone on a night shift. That day, at that time, every newspaper, every news agency had a labor correspondent, it had an agriculture correspondent. Kutty sir, am I right? Every newspaper had a labor. Can you find me a labor and employment correspondent full-time in any newspaper in this country? The only full-time farming correspondent was with the Hindu, that was me for 10 years. Rural Affairs editor, Hindu. And that too I was covering the rest of rural affairs, not just farming. Okay? When you do not have full-time correspondents to cover farmers and laborers, urban or rural, you are saying that 75% of the population do not make news. Except once in 5 years when you need their votes. Okay? So this is, you have, and then you call this media mainstream, which excludes 85% of the population, other poor people. So there is a huge difference. The youngsters joining these days face a far more difficult situation than I ever did. I got into journalism at the last moment of the right time. The last gasp, the last breath. Yeah? Indian journalism is the child of the freedom struggle. And that's where we have to look back. How journalists resisted. Year before last, a journalist called H.S. Doreswamy died. He is one of the characters in my book, Last Heroes. Doreswamy ran a newspaper in the Mysore movement against the Maharaja. It was called the Mysore Chalo movement. H.S. Doreswamy had his paper shut down. He crossed the border into British territory, Anantapur, Rayalaseema, and he reopened the newspaper there under 6 different titles. Yeah? And he very happily told me, the collector never asked me why I need 6 titles for one newspaper. Because when they shut down one newspaper, the same thing would appear the next day under a different name. So the newspaper came as People's Voice, People's Choice, People's Guardian, People's Tribune, People's whatever. It kept coming no matter how many times they closed it. Look at that sense of resistance. After that, I have seen that sense of resistance in the farmers, not in the journalists. So we need really to recapture that spirit of resistance. And by the way, about what you said about raids by enforcement directorate, etc., I want you to know that all of us are in the queue. Coming soon to a knock on the door near you. All of us are in that queue. Make no mistake about it. When you do what you do, be clear. You do challenging journalism, you will be challenged. My point is now it's gone beyond that. You will be challenged anyway. Silence will not ensure your survival. You will be attacked anyway. So for God's sake, resist.
Yeah, I mean, maybe because I'm a woman. In your book, I am so fascinated by the story of Hausabi Patil. Oh my God. Whoever who have not read the book, I request you to read his book, Last Heroes. There is a woman, like, you know, a very rural woman who died at the age of 92. She pretended as that she was suffering from domestic violence to, to cheat the cops. And she acted like, and her co-actors, the guy who acted as her husband, acted like he was abusing her. That story is amazing, really amazing. And I was asking somebody here in Kerala whether such stories have ever come in Malayalam. And, yeah, okay, but this was something very new to me. I mean, like the details of that story, how she resisted and how she marked a role in Indian freedom struggle. Yeah, so I'm so grateful for bringing up such stories. And now it's time to open the floor for discussion. So if you have some questions, Malayalathi ചോദിക്കാം, translate ചെയ്തോളാം. ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഇപ്പോൾ ചോദിക്കാം. നമുക്കൊരു 5 മിനിറ്റ് ആണ് ഉള്ളത്. ഒരു 2-3 ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ പരമാവധി.
I think the greatest lesson I learned from the freedom fighters, and that book is available in Malayalam, translated by K.A. Shaji, was this: the difference, the distinction between independence and freedom. Hausabai's leader, Rambau Lad, he said, told me when I was congratulating him and gushing with praise, I was congratulating him on his role in the freedom struggle. He corrected me. He said, we fought for 2 things. We fought for independence, we fought for freedom, we attained independence. We attained independence. Freedom is a much larger battle which we will never maybe complete in our lifetimes, but which we fight for.
32 വർഷം കൊണ്ട് മുതലാളിത്തം എറിഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കുന്ന അപ്പകഷ്ണം രുചിക്കാത്തതിൻ്റെ പേരിൽ 63 പത്രപ്രവർത്തകർ മരിച്ച ഒരു രാജ്യത്ത് നിന്നുകൊണ്ടാണ് സാറ് ഫൈറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അതിന് സാറിനൊരു അപ്രിസിയേഷൻ നൽകാൻ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുകയാണ്. അതുപോലെ AC റൂമുകളിൽ ഇരുന്ന് വെറുതെ പേപ്പറുകൾ എഴുതി തയ്യാറാക്കി തള്ളിവിടുന്നത് പോലെയല്ല സാറിൻ്റെ പ്രവർത്തനം. മണ്ണിൽ നിന്ന് കർഷകർക്കൊപ്പം അവരുടെ കൂടെ നിന്ന് റിപ്പോർട്ടുകൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കി ഭരണകൂടത്തിനെതിരെ പ്രതിഷേധിക്കുന്ന സാറിനൊരു ഹാറ്റ്സ് ഓഫ്. അതുപോലെ മാഡം ചോദിച്ച പോലെ ഏത് നേരവും വാതിലിലൊരു കൊട്ടത്തേക്കാം. അതൊരു പക്ഷേ ഒരു വെടിയുണ്ടാവാം, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സാറ് പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ ED ആവാം. പക്ഷെ അതിനൊക്കെ സാറ് സ്ട്രഗിൾ ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. പക്ഷെ സാറ് തന്നെ പറഞ്ഞു വെച്ചു, ഇത് ഇന്ത്യയിൽ എത്ര പേർക്ക് സാധ്യമാണ്? ഒരു സാധാരണക്കാരൻ നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ ഈ ചർച്ച ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ അവരെക്കുറിച്ചാണ് നമ്മൾ ചർച്ച ചെയ്യുന്നത് പോലും അറിയാതെ ഒരു അമ്മയും മകനും ഈ സൈഡിലൂടെ മുഷിഞ്ഞ വസ്ത്രമായിട്ട് നടന്നുപോയി. എത്ര പേർക്ക് ഇത് ആക്സസിബിൾ ആണ്? സാറ് പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ പലരും ജീവിത വ്യതയിൽ ഓടുകയാണ്. EMI അടയ്ക്കണം, മക്കളുടെ ഭാവി. ആർക്കും ഇതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് ചർച്ച ചെയ്യാനോ ചിന്തിക്കാനോ നേരമില്ല. അതാണ് ഇത്രയും വലിയൊരു നമ്മുടെ രാജ്യം അഭിമുഖീകരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു പ്രശ്നം ചർച്ച ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ പോലും അത് കേട്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ശുഷ്കമായ ഈ വേദി അതിൻ്റെ തെളിവാണ്. സങ്കടകരമായ യാഥാർത്ഥ്യത്തെ ഉൾക്കൊണ്ടുകൊണ്ട് സാറിനെ അപ്രീഷിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് നിർത്തുന്നു.
He was appreciating your work and he was asking that, I mean, how much people, like how many Indians, people like very ordinary people can access this kind of information, like, you know, the kind of stories that you do, the kind of stories that journalists like we are all doing.
Yep. The reason I quit so-called mainstream media and started People's Archive of Rural India is to create a platform which is accessible to anybody free of charge. There is no subscription fee. There is no advertisement cost. There is no charge for accessing data. In our library, we work under Creative Commons copyright, Creative Commons version 4, which means that you, your child, anybody can download anything from PARI website free of charge and use it without paying us a single paisa, so long as you give us the credit for it. That's all we take. Second, we are publishing in 15 languages, including Malayalam, Chhattisgarhi, Bhojpuri, Assamese. Normally in India, multilingual means English and Hindi. We published, the first Indian language we published in was Urdu. We publish in all these languages free of charge. And one more thing now we are going to add, audio. We have video, we have some audio, but everything we do will also come in audio, so that those who can't read, those who are illiterate, can still listen to what that story is about. So that's what we are trying to do.
Sainath, this is in reference to the farmers' protests in Delhi. As a photographer, therefore media person, when I had gone, can you hear better?
Yeah.
So as a photographer, when I went to the farmers' protest in Delhi, which was absolutely staggering, as you said, the scale of it was unbelievable. But seeing the camera around my neck, every single group of farmers there asked me, what media do you belong to? Who are you? And they were banishing media that they knew were Godi media.
Yeah.
They would see a camera person come, they would see the name on the mic and ask them, and the minute they knew which organization that person belonged to, they would evict them from the site. And I was only welcomed when I said I had gone with the CPM Kissan leaders who were speaking on the podium. So the farmers were absolutely clued in, and this is a people's reaction to what is happening in the media.
Yeah, but at the same time, those farmers, Ram, also the same farmers created a media center where the Godi media could also get feeds from if they needed it. But they could not create illusory media, illusory coverage that they were not permitted to do. As you said, absolutely. That's why I said the farmers not only defeated the government, they defeated the media also. Yeah, that Trolley Times was a local initiative. A bunch of young people in Singhu and Tikri, especially Singhu, started their own newspaper to cover the farmers' agitation. 5 to 10 youngsters. Every day they brought out this paper, Trolley Times. By the way, Professor Chamanlal, we gave them free access to whatever PARI was publishing, they could use. And they did sometimes.
Yeah, one thing which I want to ask you, like, as you said, PARI is completely free. We can download anything from PARI. But the problem lies in the information gap, I think. How many people know that, it is available free of cost? And so this information gap is created by what you said, the digital monopoly, the strange way of algorithms working. So how do you address that?
See, what Shahina is saying is very important. Going back to the digital monopolies. I have 80,000 plus followers on Twitter. But do you think each time I write, I'm reaching those 80,000? I reach 2% of them, maximum. To reach the next 1%, I have to make it a paid post. I want to reach my 80,000. I'm going to be paying a bloody fortune to Elon Musk. This is a fact that you should know. This is paid media. The wonderful thing about the internet, 2 things it has done. Internet has guaranteed everybody a voice. It has not guaranteed that anybody will listen to you. For them to listen to you, you pay. Right? That's one thing. The second thing is also that in the Twitter and elsewhere, Please know that the accounts of the Kissan agitation, frequently the Kissan Andolan's Twitter accounts were shut down on the orders of the government of India. Later, when a Twitter whistleblower and a Facebook whistleblower appeared in the US Congress in the Senate hearings, they said that of all the countries in the world, the maximum number of demands for blocking accounts, for shutting down accounts, came from the government of India. That is where the maximum number of demands came from. So you're having that problem as well in this. How do, now about Pari, allow me, I think I've earned the right to boast a little to you. On December 20th, we completed 10 years. Guys, I am proud to tell you that in 10 years, Pari won 81 journalism prizes, honors and awards, including 22 international prizes. And so we are struggling, we are less known, but when people know of us, one of my friends gave me an ego put down. When I was telling him this, we have won 81 prizes, one every 43 days we have won a prize. He said, yeah, that's very nice for you, but you're winning all these prizes because nobody else is doing anything. Who is doing anything else on rural India?
Yeah, there is no competition.
So you guys
for
have no
Pari.
competition. So you'll win every bloody award there is. It's not such a great deal. How do we get known? We get known by my coming and appealing to people like you. We get known wherever I had the opportunity to tell people, look, 81 prizes, and by the way, nobody covered COVID-19 like we did. Nobody covered the reverse migrations. Our reporters went back to the villages with the migrants. Nobody covered it like we did. Nobody gave numbers for the number of migrants like we did. None of this happened, but every year, March end, from between now and March, we are out with our begging bowls, asking for support. And we need also you to talk about us. We need you to look at Pari, talk about us. We reach a very young audience, by the way. Our maximum audience, 68 or 72% of our audience is between the age group 18 to 35. But Google does not give you stats for below 18. There are no stats for that. We believe we have a large number of following there also. Instagram, 120,000 followers. In 4 years, we went from 4,500 to 120,000. But we are always aware that at some point, Instagram can be shut down. We want to keep primacy for our regular website. And I want to say one more word. Why you are here at a book festival, why books are important. Why books are so important. And by the way, I prefer people read Pari on bigger devices. I'll tell you why. Oxford English Dictionary every year chooses word of the year. You know what is their word of the year this year? Brain rot. And the most famous word on internet is doom scrolling. Endlessly sitting there in the phone, even in the audience at this moment, people going on their phones. 3 medical studies have come. Harvard Medical School, King's College, Cambridge, Oxford Medical School, Oxford's Medical Department, University, are saying that constant consumption of trivia from WhatsApp, from social media, is creating brain damage. It's creating damage to cognition, to cognitive power. If your children are growing up on this diet, they will never have the knowledge, the width, the bandwidth that you do. They will not have that. Because there are limits to what you can consume on that. And the endless scrolling of trivia, it means your brain is not challenged at all. This is not me saying it. These are 3 late studies from 2024, 23 studies from Harvard Medical School. You can read about it in The Guardian. They carried a very big article on it a month and a half, 2 months ago.
Even Meta had a study about how their own platforms create mental health issues among youngsters. And yeah, Meta actually put down that study. They didn't publish that study. And one whistleblower who was working with the Facebook quit, and she wrote about it later. She brought all those studies out. That also happened. I just wanted to mention that. വേറെ ഏതെങ്കിലും questions ഉണ്ടോ, ചോദ്യങ്ങളുണ്ടോ ഇനി?
Sorry, just another intervention in relation to trolley times. Sainath has talked about the threats that journalists and writers, etc., are facing. What happened with trolley times, very talented artists who had helped design it and put it together were forced to give their work for Narendra Modi's Man Ki Baat exhibition in the National Gallery of Modern Art. 13 artists were essentially forced to give work to a propaganda exhibition which has never happened in Indian history before, certainly not after independence. And these artists did it because they were terrified of getting raided by ED, by police, and their entire reputation in the art world has plunged because of participation in that. And that happened because of what they did for trolley times.
Yeah, the same government has destroyed the NCRT, destroyed the syllabus, and full disclosure, I am one of those who had his work in NCRT expunged. I'm left out of the syllabus, okay. I didn't get too angry because I am in very distinguished company. The same tranche in which I was put in the dustbin included Charles Darwin. Right? So me and Darwin, me and Charlie, were together in the same dustbin. When they removed Charles Darwin, when the first attack on Darwin came, that time Mr. Satyapal Singh was the junior education minister. Satyapal Singh, whom I know well because he was my police commissioner in Mumbai and Pune. And there was this debate going on. And I loved it. He spoke one day in Lucknow on the main platform. And the next day it so happened that I spoke on the same platform at the same time. He was part of the election campaign in that time. Satyapal Singh explained why Darwin is wrong. He said, scientific explanation why Darwin is rubbish. He asked the audience, I challenge you, all you intellectuals here, Progressive Writers Association were there. Can anyone claim to have gone into the forest and watched apes turning into men? This is what Satyapal Singh, your Minister of Education, asked the audience. Can anyone here claim they went into the forest and watched apes turning into men? Then you talk to me about Darwin. Next day, I was unable to speak until I answered this question. The audience were saying, no, you have to tell us. Satyapal Singh ji said this. What is your reply? I said, he's got a point. No one of us has gone into the jungle and watched apes turn into men. But we are a privileged generation. We are sitting wherever we are, watching Mr. Singh and his cabinet colleagues. We are not watching apes turn into men. We are the privileged generation that is watching the reverse process. Yeah. So that, but this is the attack on history, on textbooks, on syllabus, on journalists, on journalism. In this, you have a choice. You know, whether it's in photography, whether it's in journalism. I believe, for instance, that there is the photography of power and there is the photography of protest. In between, there is a vapid zone where you don't know which way it will go. But likewise, there is a journalism of power and a journalism of resistance. A journalism of corporate power and a journalism of people's struggles. It's for us to make that choice. In the choices we make, you are going to draw attacks on ourselves. I don't know anymore that we have a choice about that. Those attacks are going to come anyway. So in this, are we with the journalism of photography of power? Are we with the photography of protest? Are we with journalism of the people? In the history of Indian media, 160 out of 200 years, it is the people of India who defended press freedom. Remember this, even during the emergency, it was not the big media that fought. Times of India caved in and entirely sucked up to the government. Small journals, mainstream, small seminar, small journals were shut down during the emergency. Journalists, individual journalists, Indian language journalists went to prison in hundreds and hundreds of numbers. When the first riots took place in Kolkata, Ashutosh Chatterjee, who became the first Vice Chancellor of Calcutta University, was one of those jailed. In 1906, when Bala Gangadhar Tilak was sentenced to 6 years for sedition, it was not the elite or civil society that came to protest Bal Gangadhar Tilak's arrest. It was the working class of the Mumbai textile mills who came on the street. 22 of them were shot dead. 16 died on that day. 6 died of their wounds. People who could not read and write came forward to defend Tilak's freedom of expression. We owe it to the people of this country to resist, to belong to the journalism and photography of protest, not of power. One of the great cliches of our time is we should speak the truth to power. I am beginning to hate this cliche. You know, there's something horrible about this. We should speak the truth to power. It suggests that power is a very innocent, naive creature. If we tell them what's wrong, they will set it right. All I have to do is to tell Mr. Amit Shah what's going on in Manipur and he will correct it. I have to speak nonsense. Our job is not just to speak the truth to power. Our central job now is to speak the truth about power. To speak the truth about power to the readers, to the masses. That is our job.
It's time to wind up this conversation. This 40 minutes that we spent with Dr. P. Sainath, like P. Sainath, it's like, as we usually say, Gabriel Garcia Marquez is a Malayali. P. Sainath is a Malayali for all of us. We are so familiar with his works, and this time that we spent together is actually like this very meaningful conversation. The title of this session is People Spend Power and Poverty, Power and Protest, and he spoke all about these aspects. And thank you for joining us, and thank you everybody for joining here and making this session so meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Preview.